Does the color of a heatsink affect its performance in dissipating heat? I know that heatsinks come in different fin forms, and those different fin forms affect the way how they dissipate heat. However, there's something I could not get about them, and it's their color. Can someone explain how does color affect a heatsink when it comes into dissipating heat? Complex explanations are welcome because I'm really curious about this particular matter.
I suspect it's unlikely, though it depends on what you mean by color. There are three fundamental modes of heat transfer for any material, and only one of them is directly affected by color. Heat is transferred from the heat source to the heat sink, and from the heat sink to the air by conduction. Most heat sinks are made of copper, heavy, and relatively expensive, or aluminium, and copper is generally left natural, and aluminum either has a natural clear covering of Al2O3, or is anodized and colored. For conduction, material rather than color is important. Convection is the movement of heat through the movement of air. While passive cooling simply uses this, you can increase its efficiency by increasing surface area, which is why heatsinks are finned, or by forced convection, blowing air to carry heat away. While air is not a good conductor, convection in air is how everything from cars to heatsinks are cooled. This is very efficient, and doesn't really rely on the material properties of the heatsink, or on the color. Radiation is, frankly, awful at transferring heat unless you're in a vacuum. It also sucks in a vacuum, but conduction and convection cannot happen. It is affected by surface color. Practically speaking, a heatsink being colored is entirely for looks, and will affect cooling less than surface area, airflow, material and the contact between the heat source and heatsink.
This Wikipedia article has some information/discussion about that. I only repeat some links below. For the complete discussion you can look at the article. Heatsink color. From this URL. How does the color of a heatsink impact its thermal performance? In natural convection, a black or dark-colored heatsink will perform 3% to 8% better than an aluminum heatsink in its natural silverish color. This is due to the fact that dark colors radiate heat more efficiently. In forced air applications, surface color does not increase a heatsink's performance due to the increase in convection. The color would provide cosmetic benefits only. From this URL. Does heatsink color affect heat dissipation? Black is the best thermal body in terms of being an absorber or emitter. Let's assume a vacuum situation. If the surface A of a black heatsink is totally covered at T1, temperature 1, by another black body at T2, temperature 2, the black heatsink would get the energy reflected from another black body at reflection energy at T14 T24 that we call Stefan Boltzmann law of thermal radiation. Here refers to Stefan Boltzmann constant. It is 5.6697 by 10 to 8 W/m2 K4. Therefore, if based on above, T1 is the temperature obtained from the black heatsink onto CPU, T2 is the ambient temperature around CPU. So if T14 T24 is a positive value, we know black is the best heat dissipation transistor since there is no thermal source around CPU inside PC case. From this URL. Do not paint a heatsink. Most heatsinks are anodized aluminum. Painting a heatsink, especially if it's a thick coat of paint, is like putting a blanket on the amplifier. If you absolutely must paint the heatsink, use the lightest, thinnest coat of paint possible.
If you want notification, please consider subscribing.